What's up, Coachable family? Welcome back to the Coachable podcast. I'm your host, Tori Gordon, and today is special because I am joined by the mindset mentor himself, Rob Dial. So excited to have him calling in today because this man is about to be a father soon, and he couldn't travel all the way to be in Vegas with me because he needs to be on the ground at home with family, but so honored to have you. This man, if you don't know who he is, I'm shocked because he's amassed over 3.5 million followers online. Rob, you are somebody I have looked up to and admired and been watching your content for years. You know, you started your personal development journey as early as 19 and look at you now, just showing the world what's possible when you commit to your own journey and your path and your dreams and you're consistent with over, I think it's 1,400 episodes of the Mindset Mentor podcast, 300 million downloads. You are making a massive, massive impact in the world. And I just want to acknowledge you and recognize you for, the work and the effort that it takes to get to that, because I know just doing this for the last couple years, it takes real dedication and devotion. And you've got to love it. And even on the days you don't love it, you have to be committed to a vision and a mission that's bigger than you. And so I'm excited for you to be on the show and to give people a taste of what that looks like, because not only will they be inspired to take action in their own lives, you've actually given them a roadmap for how to transform their life with your new book, Level Up. It's all about how to get focused, stop procrastinating, and start taking action. And I'm excited to share with people how they can start to do that. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that. And I received that. Thank you for the kind words. And it's good to finally connect. I've known about you for a while as well. And sent you some DMs a couple of years ago because I came across your page as well. And I was like, this is great. I love the message you're putting out. So sad that we can't be in person, but this is just as good. It's second best.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll take what we can get, but I appreciate that. And like I said, I've been watching you for a while, and this new book is really powerful. I want to start with kind of just an understanding of why now, like why Level Up? Why did you decide to write this book at this time? And what is your like real hope for what people will take away from it? Like why Level Up?
Yeah, I mean, good question. So number one, I don't like writing. I don't like text messages. I don't like emails. I don't like any of that stuff. Like my entire team knows, like, if you want me, send me a voice message, I'll send you a voice message back. That's usually the way I prefer to do it. So I didn't feel like I needed a book. I didn't feel like I was like, maybe one day. Then 2020 hit, and I talked to two of my friends about that I both had books. One of them is Hal Elrod, and he has a book called The Miracle Morning, just like blew up out of nowhere. And I was like, hey, I'm thinking about writing a book. I feel like there's something that needs to come out. I'm not really sure what it is. He's like, I'll get you on a call with my book agent. You can just talk about it. And I was like, all right, cool. So I could just see like a little bit further, and I got on a call with him and started telling my ideas. And he's like, I love this. We should talk more. And then I also called up Jay Shetty, and I was like, hey man, I'm thinking about writing a book. He had just put out like months before then, Think Like a Monk. I was like, I'm kind of thinking about doing it. What are your thoughts? And would you go traditional? Would you go self-published? And we kind of talked about it. And it just kind of started. And once it started, it was like, once my brain opened up to like, okay, we're going to write a book, more and more ideas came in. And so what's interesting is that I then took a step back and I was like, okay, I'm going to write a book. What the hell am I going to write a book on? Like, there's so many things that I could write about. And I was like, all right, if I look at the Mindset Mentor, the podcast that I have, like, what is it that I really do? Like, I don't enjoy being called like a motivational speaker because I'm not trying to motivate anybody. I'm really trying to give them like the tools to understand themselves more than anything else, and understand like neurology, psychology, early childhood development to like, now I understand how I am the adult that I am. And I looked at 1,400 episodes, or I guess probably about 1,000 episodes at that time. And I was like, man, almost every episode is some sort of tip or trick to get someone to take action. Like it's some sort of way to get out of your own way. And I was like, cool, I'll write a book on taking action because I feel like that's probably a thing. And the reason why that really hit home with me is because when I was a kid, my father was an alcoholic. And when I was 10, my parents divorced. from him being alcoholic and trying to get me out of the house. And then when I was 15, he passed away from liver failure from the drugs and the alcohol that he took. And I remember sitting in like the funeral home with him and, seeing his body. He was the first person I ever knew that passed away. And I remember sitting there and being like, man, this guy was such a dreamer. He used to tell me about the things he wanted to do and the places he was going to take me, and he never did it. And I was like, that's not going to be my life. Like, I will not have that be my life. And at 15, like, I really decided that. And about 3 weeks after my father passed away, my mom was like, hey, like, what do you think about the whole situation, your father passing away? And I said, I think if Dad understood how much good is going to come from it, he'd be okay with passing away. And it was like, from that moment on, it was like my mission to like make something good out of this terrible thing that happened to me. And I think the place it actually started was sitting there in the funeral home and being like, I'm not going to get to the end of my life and not have done every single thing that I want. And then so when I looked at it and I was writing the book, it was like, that's what I want to write about. Like, I want to teach people how to get out of their own way so they can actually like take action and create the life that they want to.
Powerful. I mean, thank you for sharing that story. I deeply relate. And death has taught me so much about life and how to live life. There's a quote, and I can't remember now who it's by. It's someone in that Oprah interviewed in her Wisdom of Sundays book. And basically he talks about, I'm not as concerned about what happens when we die, but if there's life before death. And we assume that we're all living. And I know personally that there was a large part of my life where I was just kind of sleepwalking on autopilot through life and hadn't really stopped to take consideration or take inventory of my life and like, what do I want to do? What do I want to experience? And how do I become responsible for creating that in my life? Instead, I just was taking what was given to me and accepting that. And death was the thing that allowed me to realize, like, you don't have time to waste. That your time and your energy are your greatest assets. And what are you going to do with them? Where are you going to put them? And so I want to start with you right there at the cusp of like the intersection between wanting different and yet being so attached to the way things have been. And I see it as this proverbial, like, spiritual barbed wire fence almost that people are sitting on, and they've got one foot in this ideal version of them that has the podcast or writes the books or speaks on stages or owns a business or has a beautiful family, whatever it might be. And then they have another leg on the other side of the fence in a completely different life. And they're straddling that fence and they're not moving in any direction. And I'm sure as you hear it all of the time from the people that listen to your show and that work with you is, I feel stuck. Like, how I feel stuck. And when I hear that, I'm like, I see that fence and someone's just sitting right on top of it. Knowing that is the reality for so many people who's probably listening to this right now. What do you say to somebody who's like, I want better. I don't want yesterday was my birthday. I don't want another year to go by and not be better or create what I want to create. How do you help someone get off that fence?
It's a really good question. I think for me, like if I go back to, I can remember one of the most life-changing moments in my life. So the reason why I'm so hardcore on coaching and I believe so much about it and like train coaches at this point, I've been doing that for 5 years, is because I hired my first coach when I was 19. So I paid $500 a month at 19 years old because I so badly didn't want my life to be what it was going to be if I didn't make a change. And I paid more for that coach than I did for rent while I was in college. And I worked with him for 2 years and there was you taught me like a lot of stuff, but I honestly don't remember one conversation. That's any conversation except for one, I guess is a better way of saying it. And I started with him because I wanted to be better. I wanted to improve myself. I wanted to learn how to make money. I was in a new sales position. I wanted to learn sales. I wanted to get better. And I did what I typically did. Like I kind of was just lazy and he'd give me assignments and I wouldn't do the assignments and I would show up late to calls by a couple minutes. And it was just like little tiny things, right? And he had this like coming to God moment with me. this call and he's like, hey, Rob, he's like, I got a question for you. And I was like, okay. He goes, let's say you're looking at a business, right? It's a huge business and the business fails, they don't make enough money and they go out of business. Whose fault is it? And I was like, the business owner. He's like, well, let's say it's a big business, thousands and thousands of employees. Whose fault is it? I was like, ultimately, it's got to be the CEO's fault. He's like, all right, cool. He's like, if that business succeeds, if somebody's able to take thousands of people and get them to move to one place and get that goal to happen, whose fault would that be? And the business is successful. And I said, well, that's probably the CEO's fault as well. Like, it's obviously all the people, but there has to be somebody who's the captain of the ship. He's like, okay, cool. He's like, I've got a question for you. If you get to the end of your life and you regret, you wish you would have done more, you wish you would have had more, you would have impacted the world, you would have brought your potential out into the world, and you're on your deathbed and you get to that moment and you didn't do the things that you wanted to do, whose fault would that be? I was like, that'd be my fault. And he says, okay, if you do get to the end of your life and you're on that deathbed, and mind you, my dad had died 4 years before this. So that was like the first deathbed that I saw, right? And you do get to the end of your life and you have the happiness, the joy, the success, the fulfillment, the love, the money, everything that you've ever wanted. Whose fault would that be? And I was like, that'd be my fault. He said, your problem is you're acting like somebody's going to come and save you and nobody's going to come and save you. And your life will not change until you decide that you're going to be the CEO of your life. And so that moment, like for me, was like, oh my God, I get it. Like I was waiting for like my own knight in shining armor to come and save me, right? Yeah. And there was nobody that was coming. And so I think that's the first thing is like, you've got to understand that everything that happens is your fault, good or bad. And you've got to be okay with that. And I think the second thing is you have to make a decision. Most people, when you say like, you're on this side, you're on this side, the problem is they've got their feet in both sides, right? You have to make a decision. And when you look at like the root word for the word decision in Greek is dikadere, which actually means to cut off, right? You know this. And it means like, I will quote Marshall Mathers, and hopefully I can cuss on this, but success is my only motherfucking option. Failure's not. Like that has got to be the mindset of like, I will go this way and I'm either going to succeed in whatever this life that I want to create, or I'm going to die trying. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go, oh no, this doesn't work for me. Right. I'm not going to like when I was, for instance, starting my coaching business, I had no idea how to do it. There was nobody teaching this in 2015. So for me, I quit my job. I was making like over $200,000 a year. I quit my job and about 3 months later, I was in so much fear because I was like, I'm 27 years old. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. Nobody's here to coach me on this stuff. And I was sitting there thinking about it and I was like, I might just go back and work for someone else. And I remember that fear coming up and the fear making me want to go back into what was comfortable. Right. And, I believe that the universe is always talking to us. And so I went home. It was right around, right around Christmas or Thanksgiving of 2015. And my sister goes, hey, have you ever seen this box of dad's stuff? And I was like, no. And it was like, t-shirt of his watch, it was his glasses. And there was a bunch of letters. My dad was in jail for a little while and he used to write us letters. And one of them he wrote to my sister on her 19th birthday. And I read the entire thing. And I remember sitting there, I was reading it. And the very last line, I was like, and I was like this time warp where I was like, he wrote this letter to her, but I actually think the universe is giving me this so that I can read this right now. And the last line of it said, I hope you live your life with courage, love, and laughter. And I was like, this is what I need. Like I'm living in so much fear that I want to give up the one thing that I want more than anything else in this world. And I'm in so much fear that I'm going to give it up. And I looked at a line, it says, first thing says courage. And I was like, there's no other option. Like I'm going to do this and I'm going to be successful at it or I'm going to die trying and I'm okay dying trying. And so I was like, what can I do to make this like a moment in my life that I don't forget? And I was like, I'm gonna get a tattoo. And I'd never had a tattoo. No tattoo, zero, right? I still only have 2 to this day. And I got it, you can't see it because I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt, but it literally is my dad's handwriting blown up on my arm in big letters, his exact handwriting. And it says, live your life with courage, love, and laughter. Because I was like, I'm not going back. There is no other option for Rob. Stop thinking about going back. And when you do that and you're like, there isn't a plan A and there's no plan B, then plan A is the only thing. And I need to figure it out.
Yep.
And that's really what I think it comes down to is people have to make that full on decision and commitment of I'm going to do it, whatever it is that they want to do.
Yes. 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 Thank you. Because what you're talking about is the power of reclaiming your choice, right? That you have agency to choose, and actually sitting on the fence and doing nothing is a choice that you're making.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And to decide is people think, oh, I need to think about this decision so I can get some clarity. Let me think about it, right, for a little while to see if this is for me or not. And what I have found oftentimes is actually the more we think about it, the more confused we get, or the more we talk ourselves out of it. And really it's action that gives you clarity. You make a decision, you do the thing, and either it works or it doesn't. You enjoy it or you don't. It fuels you and gives you more energy, or it depletes you. And now I have clarity based on what I just did. Right. And I think we live in this culture where we think we're supposed to know before we do, like in the sense that like, I know how it's going to work out. I need the guarantee. I need to know that my effort is going to be quote unquote worth it. And everyone I've ever interviewed that's on the other side of the screen or sitting in this chair next to me that is successful at the highest level, like real world class people, are like, no, jump. Do it, fail, get up, do it, fail again, iterate, and there are no guarantees besides that life is unpredictable and you got to step into the unknown, but in the unknown is that life that you want to create for yourself, as well as all your fear. And that's where I want to go with you next. It's talking about this fear, because that is what is so debilitating for people. And that lives in the mind. And then you said something very specific, which is a word I love and I think is a value of everybody I respect, or a principle of the people that like embody what I respect most, which is courage. And courage is not something that exists in the mind. I know you know this. It's a heart word. It's about your heart. So because you're the mindset mentor, but yet you're sitting here telling me I got to get connected to my heart to do something.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. This is what's crazy about it is I love telling people this. And I think one of the reasons why people follow me is because they just kind of say things as they are. Like, I've never, ever wanted to seem perfect. Like, I'm fully okay with telling everybody I deal with all of the exact same shit that you deal with. I wake up sometimes and I'm stressed, and sometimes I'm anxious, and sometimes I don't feel good. And sometimes, I'm a little bit sad, or sometimes I feel and then sometimes I'm full of joy and I'm full of happiness and all this stuff. And it's like, what I found is first off, there are no bad emotions, but when I find myself in a lower vibration, I guess you could say, I just have tools that I've been using for years to help me get back to where I want to be. That's what it comes down to. I don't, people are like, you've been working on yourself I just turned 38. So my birthday was last week. So we're pretty close in birthdays. Yeah. So I just turned 38. I started working on myself at 19. So 19 years of working on myself. I'm still not perfect. And guess what? I don't plan on ever being perfect, which is fine. But when you look at fear, and you look at courage, I 100% agree with you, which is, and I try to do the exact same thing, is I go back to the breath in my body anytime that I notice my body being anxious or fearful or being stressed or whatever it might be, because I know that I'm in my head and I'm not in my body. I'm not here. And my brain is always somewhere else, right? Like, I'm a really good visionary and thinking about the future and all that stuff. But when I'm sitting down to meditate, it gets in the way sometimes, right? And so I'm constantly thinking about the future. And if I'm thinking about the future and then I start stressing out, I'm like, all right, I'm not here, right? The body, it's always here. The mind, it's always in the past, it's always in the future, it's always somewhere else. And so the interesting thing though is there's a couple different things that we could talk about. And the first thing is we could talk about fear, and we could dive into how to quote unquote overcome fears. And the second thing that we could talk about is we could really start to dive into how to be more courageous and more present and go into our heart. The first thing, when you look at fears, when I wrote the book, I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a book on taking action. My very first thing that I think is, well, why don't people take action? That was the very first thing that popped into my head. And I was like, well, shit, I probably got to make the first part of the book about why people don't take action, because there's no reason to give them tools and tactics if they're not taking action in the first place. And literally chapter 1 is fear.
Yeah.
Like it's about fear. And I started like diving into fear, and I was like, okay, where's fear come from? It's a protection mechanism. It's trying to keep us safe. And one of my friends, his name's Chad. I had a conversation with him probably about 6 years ago, and he lived with a native Brazilian tribe in Brazil. Like he had to fly into Brazil, he had to get on a boat, and he had to take a 2-day trip. And he stayed with them for 40 days, and he had to walk around and sleep with a machete. Like I'm talking like in the middle. He slept in a teepee, all of this stuff to like learn their ways and all of this stuff. And he said an interesting thing to me. He's like, I didn't have any stress and I didn't have any anxiety. And the reason why was because all of my fears were so primal that my brain didn't get a chance to think about these things. So we had this really deep conversation of like, oh man, so fears are kind of 2 categories. Like there's primal fears and there's intellectual fears. And so primal fears are like pain or death is attached to it, right? Like that's what he was feeling. Intellectual fears basically like, well, you know, what if my mom judges me? What if I put this up there, something on Instagram and my boss sees it? What if I do this? And it's all like fear of success, the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of rejection. All of those end up being intellectual fears. And I was like, man, so what's crazy about him is that a primal fear exists in reality. It's physical most of the time. You can see it, you can understand it. An intellectual fear only exists in the mind. Doesn't exist anywhere else. It's our projection into a future to try to, you know, use it as a protection mechanism. And I was like, this is interesting. And so I was literally in Sedona, and that's where I wrote the book. I started writing the entire book in Sedona. I rented an Airbnb by myself, and I was overlooking the mountains, and I was like, I need to go for a drive. And I was like, I'm gonna try to find someone that I respect and just kind of see what they talk about. So I went on a drive, and I was in Sedona, and I put in Sadhguru fears. Overcoming fear, something like that. And what he says in it is he says, I'm going to teach you how to overcome your fears. Here's the secret. You can't overcome your fears because you can't overcome something that doesn't exist. And I was like, oh my God, like that's it. Like What we're doing is we're waking up in the morning, we're creating the boogeyman, whatever this fear is. And then instead of spending our time actually taking action to create the life that we want to, we're spending our time fighting the boogeyman all day long, which isn't there in reality. And then what are we doing? We're going to bed and wake up doing it over and over and over again. And so it was really an eye-opening thing for me because you can literally take your list of all of the fears that are like holding you back from creating the life that you want to, and none of them, or 99.999% of them, aren't even real and don't exist in reality. So then we can make the decision, like we were talking about earlier, which is, do I want to continue to just have this occupy my energy throughout the day, my mental, my physical, my emotional, my spiritual energy? Or do I want to just say, you know what? I see how stupid this is. I want to focus on something else. And when you do that, it makes it easier to be courageous because the truth of it is you realize that it was never there in the first place. You're not fighting a tiger. You're worried about maybe your business failing in the future. But right now, your business is not failing.
Right.
And so once you do that, it makes it really a whole lot easier to be a little bit more courageous and take the action that you need to.
Yeah. I love what you just said about how they're not real. I recently wrote down, and I know in your book you take people through like a process for writing down your fears. Mm-hmm. And in your book, you say that fear arises from the image in our brain of a future pain that we're trying to avoid. And so we're projecting this image on the movie screen of our mind of like future pain, and the mind does what it's meant to do, which is protect us from that or prevent that, because it's protect or prevent. And so it's like, okay, we won't go there because I'm seeing pain, you know, and it reminds me that like our imagination is one of our mental faculties that we're just using all wrong. Like as children, I don't know, maybe this is my privilege speaking. It probably is. And but like I was privileged enough to grow up in a home where I did get to be a child, and I wasn't thinking about, you know, what could go wrong all of the time. I grew up in an environment where I could just be a kid, you know, and I was using my imagination to come up with, you know, plays and songs. And when I was bored, I used my imagination to get creative. And I think now as adults and living in the culture that we live in, where we're just taught you have to do more in order to be more, and you're on it needs to happen right now. And if you're not getting results right now, you're not doing it right, and you're not doing it quick enough, and you need to compare yourself to everybody else. And it's just so overwhelming. So we have a maladaptive way that we're now using our imagination as adults, which is just projecting fear everywhere versus using it for anything creative, that is actually going to create something we want to experience versus this perceived pain that we're just trying to avoid, which naturally just keeps us really small and doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, the crazy part about it though, is like, I talk about this a lot, and I feel like I want to preach it from like the mountaintops for people like really understand, like deep in their bones, is like, I love what you said about our creativity is just, it's misplaced completely. Is I think we all are extremely creative, but yeah, most people are very creative in the ways that everything could go wrong.
Destructive.
As a protection mechanism. It makes sense, right? But the problem with it, and think about, I'll give you an example before I actually tell you. So we've all had the dream, right? Where we're walking through a forest and we're on a path, and then out in front of us, we see like a tiger. And we're like, oh, hold on, there's a tiger. I need to stop. And you start backing away. And then you notice the tiger's head turns and he looks at you and you're like, I got to run. So you start running the opposite direction, and you're trying to run from the tiger. And you look over, it's getting closer, and you look over your shoulder one more time, and it's like about to take a bite. And then you wake up, and what happens? It's like your brain is racing, your heart is racing, you're sweating, you're out of breath, but your body, your physical body never moved a muscle. So your entire body, without moving, your brain created a mental image, and your entire body reacted to it. It started sweating, your heart rate went up, your breath changed, as if you were actually getting chased by a real tiger. And the crazy part about being a human is that we can project ourselves into a fear, into a moment. Like we're always constantly projecting ourselves out of this moment. Almost always, it seems like, unless we're very present, right? But most of the time what we're doing is we're projecting into a place that we don't want to be. Like I start this business and I really want to be successful, but then we start thinking like, well, like what if this doesn't work out? What if the business fails? What if I end up being homeless? And then we actually start to project ourselves the same way into a future that is not the future that we want. But here's the incredible part about it, is that even though we're not in that future, our body reacts as if we're already in that future. So our body feels like the business already failed. The body feels like that person broke up with us, or that person rejected us, or that my boss says that I'm fired, or whatever it is might be. So we're constantly putting our body through so much turmoil by projecting into futures that we don't want. And then we're wondering, why is it so hard to take action? Because it's scary as hell. Like what you're envisioning doesn't look exciting. I wouldn't want to work towards it either, right? And so if we can do that though, then we start going, okay, well, if I can project myself into a terrible future, is it possible for me to project myself into like a future that's amazing, that I love? Yeah. And I learned visualization in 2009. I was reading a book called by Brian Tracy. It was called Maximum Achievement. I was like, I could try this. I want to try this. And it was actually for a company I was with. I wanted to win a trip to Vegas, actually, because we were going to stay at the Encore because it was brand new. And I was like, oh my God, I want to go. I've never been to Vegas. And I was, 23 years old. And I remember I went in my closet and I visualized what it would be like to be with everybody else in like my suit and tie at the President's Club was what it was called. And I envisioned it every single morning. And then I hit it and I was so excited about it. I was like, man, maybe this works. And then in 2017, my wife and I, we decided we wanted to move to Italy and go travel for 6 months. And so January 1st, 2017, I put, I'm going to live in Italy by July 1st, 2017. And I woke up every single morning, I started visualizing it and visualizing it and visualizing it. And I'm not the best at seeing it, but I can try to get there. And then I realized visualization is just like, that's just seeing something. And I started thinking in my head, like, can I bring the rest of my senses into it and make it so potent? And so I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to figure out how I can go ahead and visualize and make this visualization even like more potent. And so I went into a phase, like I got deep with it, right? Like when I want to visualize something, when I want to when I want to manifest something into my life, like I get hardcore in it, right? And so I was like, I'm going to go into a Facebook group. I found a Facebook group called Expats in Rome. Went on there and I said, hey, it was my girlfriend at the time. My girlfriend and I want to go and live there. This is what we're into. What part of town should we stay in? We had all these different recommendations, but a lot of them that kept popping up was Trastevere, a town that's a neighborhood that's in Rome. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go on Google Maps and I'm going to find a cafe that I like that's in Trastevere. And I'm going to go on Google Maps and I'm going to actually walk the streets of Google Maps by using the street view. And I would look at it every single morning and I would see it in my head and I would go, okay, now, and this is where I started to get kind of crazy. I was like, I'm going to be outside sitting at this place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my chair. I'm going to sit outside. I drink coffee every single morning. I'm going to make my coffee. I'm going to put on my headphones. And I found a track called Streets of Rome. And I'm going to hear the sounds of Rome. I'm going to sit there. I'm going to drink my coffee. I'm going to smell the coffee. I'm going to taste the coffee. I'm going to feel the cup in my hand. I'm going to feel the sun on my skin. I'm going to visualize myself walking to this coffee shop every single day, sitting there, enjoying my cup of coffee. And I was, once again, terrified that I didn't know how to grow my business. But what happened was I went from terrified to so excited. We need to get there as soon as possible. I need to figure out what I need to do to get there. The goal is to be there by July 1st, 2017. We got there by June 1st, 2017, because I was like, I can't wait anymore. Oh. And so it's like, it's an example of we're going to use our mind. We're going to use our brain is always going to be moving and thinking into the future. Instead of just letting it go, because a mind left to its own devices will almost always go negative. If we can be more intentional with every one of our thoughts and the projection into the future, we can actually get ourselves excited about creating the future, which then makes us more motivated to take whatever action we need to create it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this, I hope you guys at home are taking notes. Like, you can literally create the experience before you have the experience in your mind and walk yourself through that and allow yourself to get emotionally invested and involved and care and get excited, and then watch how that gives you a direction to follow. You know, so many people are like, how am I going to get there? And it's like, well, first of all, do you even know what direction you're moving in? A lot of people don't even have the set goal, you know, with a date attached to it for when they want to accomplish said thing. They're just like, I want better, you know, I want a good relationship, but they haven't defined what that looks like. You know, I want to have a business where I'm making a lot of money. Well, how much money and what kind of business and what does that look like? You know, and really taking the time to get specific and get clear so that you can give your mind something to focus on. You know, and I know in your book, you talk about it's more about the direction than the speed in which you get there. Tell me a little bit about that, because I think so many people get caught up on this. How fast am I moving, you know, versus what direction am I moving in?
Yeah. So funny you asked this question. Literally like an hour ago, I recorded an episode on almost this specifically. So it worked out perfectly. So I'll give you an example, right? Like I think I try to make things like stupid simple. Like I want to make things as simple as possible because I feel like we overcomplicate things, right? So I was thinking about goals one day and I was like, if I were to zoom out 50,000 feet and not get so into it, what do goals need in order to happen, right? And I was like, they need direction. Like you need to be heading in the right direction, which is, first off, do you know where you're going?
You can't hit a target.
Do you know where you're going? Have you decided? Yeah. Right? Like what's the direction? Then the next thing is action. What's the right actions to get there? And the last part is time. We live in a society where everything happens near immediately, right? Like yesterday, literally a couple of days ago was the eclipse and I was able to see it in my backyard. It was insane, right? And my wife's mom is over and she's watching something on TV. She goes, oh my God, the guy says that the moon is only 250 miles away. And he misspoke. And I was like, no, I think it's 250,000. And she's like, well, he said 250. Are you sure? And I was like, well, we can Google it. And we Googled it and we immediately had the answer, right? When I was a kid, we used to have to like go to the library, you know, and if the encyclopedia was checked out, we had no idea. We would just never know how far the moon was, right? So we know everything immediately. I can get food delivered to my house near immediately. I can get someone to come pick me up, all of this. So we're like trained on instant gratification nowadays. But if you look at everything, I believe that the universe has a specific amount of time that you have to be putting into something before it gives you whatever it is, the thing that you're working towards, right? Like my wife is pregnant right now and she's due in 40 days. How ridiculous would it have been if at the beginning in September when we found out she was pregnant, if I would have said, hey, Lauren, look, I know this is supposed to take 9 months, but like, it'd be really cool to get like a vacation by the end of the year. Like, do you think you could get it done in 5? Like she would have slapped me if I would have asked that question, right? Why is it ridiculous? Because God or the universe has decided it takes about 9 months to create a baby. Okay. Well, if that's the case, if I'm taking the right action, if I'm heading in the right direction, I'm taking the right action, I've just got to trust that it's going to work out one day. And eventually I'm going to get there. And what's crazy about it is that I think the universe rewards people who don't give up. What we think, it's like Tony Robbins' quote, which is, people overestimate what they can do in a year, but underestimate what they can do in a decade. Yeah. And for me, that like the older I get, the more time I put into like my business, into the podcast, into everything I do, I'm like, oh my God, all of this is making so much more sense. Is like, I wanted a successful business the first year. And it was fine the first year, but I wanted to be making like $300,000 my first year. That didn't happen. I made like $60,000 the first year. And I could have given up and been like, oh my gosh, this isn't worth it. I'm making a quarter of what I was making before. But I was like, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. And then about 6 years later, it just exploded. Like all of it, everything exploded. And that's just kind of the way that it worked. It was, I was heading in the right direction. I was taking the right action. I wasn't giving up. And then it's kind of like the corny cliche story of the Chinese bamboo, which is like you plant the seed and you water it and it gets sun and nothing happens in year 1 and nothing happens in year 2 and nothing in 3 and nothing in 4 and nothing in 5. And then year 6, it just explodes. That's exactly how it was for my podcast was exactly the same. As it got to the point where it was like the first year, 18 months, I got to like 100,000 downloads a month and it stayed there for 4 years. And it didn't move for 4 years. It just stayed in like 80 to 110,000 downloads a month. And then it just started going. And then it doubled, it tripled, it quadrupled, and then it got up. The most downloads I've ever had in a month was over 7 million. Wow. That's 70 times what it was normally. And so it's like, but I just didn't stop because I made the decision. I'm going to succeed at this or I'm going to die trying. And the thing about it is, I know that I'm not in control of when my success or when any of those things are going to be birthed, but I'm heading in the right direction. I know where I'm going for. I know what I'm trying to work towards. I'm taking the right action. I'm going to take my hands off the steering wheel. I'm just going to say, I trust you. It's going to work out the way that's supposed to work out. And if I do that, usually doesn't happen as fast as I want. Actually, it never happens as fast as I want to. But when it does happen, it happens 10 times better than I could have possibly imagined.
Right. It's like, I know another concept in your book, you talk about like, I think the internal GPS or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I think about this with my clients or the people in my life and my community. Often it's just that we put in a destination into Waze or Google Maps. And we're like, okay, I got the goal. I know what the goal is. I know the destination, I know the direction I want to go in. Let me put it into my little universal GPS, internal GPS, and it's going to shoot out a bunch of directions. And I'm going to know, okay, I need to go this, like put in this many reps on the podcast. And then I'm going to take a left on this, lane. And I'm going to go here and there's going to be this traffic and X, Y, and Z. And life is like, we're sitting in the proverbial like car waiting to get started until we have the list of all of the directions in front of us to know exactly what to do. And we're just sitting there, and life's like, no, get going, start taking action. And then I'm going to prompt you with the next right action. Right. And then you're going to do that and you're going to keep doing that. And until I prompt you with the next thing, and you have to trust that there will be another prompting to get you towards that end destination. And so that's one thing that I think a lot about is how many of us are waiting to start taking action because we're waiting on all of the steps to be revealed to us. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can't. You can only connect the dots looking backward. And that's where you're like, oh, I see why I had to do X, Y, and Z, or I had to work at this company and gain this skill and then, go through this breakup to learn this lesson so I could meet this person, whatever it is. But we expect that to happen on the front end. Or another horrible scenario, which I see a lot of times, is that we're instead of having a direction and moving towards it, we're just following whoever's in front of us on the metaphorical path of life, right? We're just like, I don't know where I'm headed. I'm just following that guy who's in front of me and I'm doing whatever he's doing. But he could be going in a completely different direction that you want to go to. And then you end up somewhere you don't want to be. And you're like, how did I get here? Well, you were just following that guy. You didn't put a destination into that internal GPS system. And I think that's how kind of the universe, in my experience, works. It's like, decide, what do you want? Commit to it, get off the fence, start moving, and then take the next right action. And then watch the journey, if you will, unfold. And it comes up against this need, I think, primal, like this need that we all have for control and for like how much we rely on what we know versus what we don't know. Like the familiar is so much more of a comfortable place for so many of us. But I know you talk so much about this. It's like your comfort zone is not where your growth lies.
Your comfort zone is where your dreams go to die. And it's like I'll give you a great example based off of what you're saying too. Like one of the things I say in the book is like how so we always hear like, oh, take the first step. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Like all of that is true. But like another analogy that I like to give people is like, if we go with the analogy of like being in a car, right? Like I live in Austin, Texas. If I want to go to my friend's Mike lives in Houston, right? If I want to go to Houston and see him and I go at night, can I see the entire route of how to get there? I can't. All I can see if I leave at night is the next 100 feet in front of my car, just the headlights, right? And so I call it like living in the headlights, which is you can only see the next 100 feet. But I promise you, when you get to the end of those 100 feet, you'll see the next 100 feet and then the next one. And then eventually you're going to get there. You will not see the entire path. And like my book is the perfect example of it, which is like, I was like, I don't know, maybe I kind of want to start it. And then I called up Hal and he told me, and that was like my first 100 feet that was lit up. And then I called up Jay and it was another 100 feet that was lit up. And then I talked with the book agent, it was another 100 feet. And then I started putting ideas down, it was another 100 feet. And then fast forward 3 years, 16 rounds of edits. I'm like, oh my God, I have a book. This is insane. I didn't think it was going to be what it was, but it just kind of slowly developed over time into what it is. And I think that's the important thing is like, you can sit there and be like, well, I want to know exactly how the path is going to work out. As you said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You will never know what the future is going to be. You're never going to be able to predict the future. But if you feel like you're heading in the right direction, you're taking the right action, eventually life will unfold in front of you. And if you're heading in the right direction versus being like, oh, I'm just going to see where life takes me, or I'm going to just follow this guy. If you're actually intentional about the direction that you're heading, and you do decide exactly what it is that you want, and you're taking the right action, eventually you'll get it. And I like to read a lot. I've read like almost every self-development or whatever personal growth book that's out there. And so now that I've gotten into, I've gotten like gone past it, I've kind of like gotten into like old spiritual texts, and it not drives me crazy. It's actually just like mind-boggling to me how many of them say something along the lines of ask and you shall receive. Yes. Ask and you shall receive. If you look at the word abracadabra, people think like, oh, it's to pull a rabbit out of a hat. Abracadabra actually means as I speak, I create. And as I speak what I want, I am creating every single moment. What is thinking? It is speaking in your head. So I'm constantly looking at all these ancient texts that are just like, just ask for it. Just get clear on what it is that you want and say, I want this thing and I'm willing to give up what I need to in order to get there. I will take the action to get there. And it's like text after text after text after text has some sort of form of like, just ask for it. Yeah. Ask it and you'll get it. Yeah. Pray for it. You'll get it. Believe you'll get it. You'll get it, Our words are so powerful. They're so powerful. And we're like, we don't, to your point, recognize one, the power in the tongue, and that we're creating at all times, not just necessarily what we want, but if you are not using your language or your thoughts to create, it will create whatever you're thinking about, right? Exactly, so if you are thinking about all the things that could go wrong and all of your fears and all of the what ifs, like you are casting that spell
if you will, over your life in the same way. And so it doesn't just work for manifesting what you want. You are always manifesting at all times. So if you don't like the results that you're getting, we have to look, we have to kind of reverse engineer and think about what are the thoughts and the beliefs, the thoughts and the things that I'm speaking into my life or over my life. If I'm complaining all the time and talking about what's not working and how tired I am and this, that, and the other, I'm going to create more of that. And I love what you were saying earlier about when you really get into the manifestation process, you just allow yourself to immerse in all of your senses, because when you do that, it's not, it shifts from I want this thing to I'm experiencing this thing now before I've even experienced it, because you've created an environment where you can hear, smell, see all of it. And I think what ultimately we're saying, and you really are saying in your book, is like, become responsible for what you're thinking, speaking, saying, focusing on, because you're going to get more of that. And you can be deliberate, in where you choose to focus your attention. And that brings me to a question I want to ask you about concentration, consistency, and ultimately focus, because after 1,400 episodes, you've been doing this work for a long time. Now you're seeing the compounding effects of your time and effort over time. Like, how did you stay committed in the years where you weren't seeing the results you wanted to see? Because it's really easy to get distracted and lose focus. What do you say to people who are like in that time where they're really hustling and grinding and putting in the work, but they're like, that thing looks fun. That looks more fun, because this is like really hard right now.
Yeah. Good question. I think when it comes, like, if I'm being truly honest, like, I would still do this if I made no money doing it. Like, I started in podcasting in 2015. Do you know who podcasted in 2015? Like, Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss. They were like the only ones in Lewis. They're like with the only three that were there. I feel like it wasn't a thing. When I first started podcasting, people were like, oh, what do you do? And I was like, I have a podcast and a coaching company. And they were like, oh, what's a podcast? Like, I heard that more than I heard anything else. And they were like, well, how do I listen to it? I was like, well, you got to go on your computer. You got to pull up iTunes. You got to go to the drop-down menu, go out of music. And so it was like hard to find it. So I never actually fully ever did this for money. It wasn't part of it. There was no money to be made in it. I did it because I felt within like every fiber of my being that this is a thing I was supposed to be doing. And because it sometimes what feels right isn't very logical. Like to leave a job that I worked from home, was young, making a bunch of money, and it was pretty damn easy to do this, made no sense logically. But like deep within me, I was like, my wife, the one thing that she always says is she's like, your intuition is really strong. And when and it's been giving me over the past, few years, so much confirmation of all of the things that I was feeling are now starting to happen, where I'm like, when my intuition hits and I feel it, I'm going for it and I'm going 100% in, which I understand is a trust thing. We've got to learn, we've got to kind of test it and start to trust ourselves a little bit more. But I think what I heard Oprah say at one time, and I think it's true. And it's don't follow the money, follow your passion, because the money always comes second. And I think what happens is people usually go, well, how can I make money right now? And then they follow something they're not passionate about. And to succeed at something, whatever success means to somebody, and I'm not just talking about money, takes a lot of work. To have a very successful relationship, it takes a lot of work. And there's going to be good times, there's going to be bad times. It takes a lot of work. But if you don't love the person, you don't want to put in as much work, right?
Right.
But if you really love the person, you're like, it's worth it. I'm going to put the work in. And so what it comes down to is like sometimes, and also FYI, sometimes it's that it comes with the idea of like, okay, I've actually decided this isn't right. Like that's completely fine as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so sometimes you have to realize that in order to like really succeed at something, whatever that thing might be, you do have to put in sometimes an obscene amount of work. And when you love, it's like my second cliche of the day. If cliches are cliches because they're true. Like if you really truly do love something, it doesn't feel like you're working. Like it's you have to find something that would look like work to other people, but feels like play to you. Like I always tell people, when I get done recording podcast episodes, when I get done like recording this one with you, I will 100% guaranteed have more energy than when we started. Where does it come from? It's not coming from me. It's coming from, in the way I believe it, and it is like, I believe that the universe is giving me energy in order to do this stuff. And so there was I heard Paul Chek say it one time, and he said, when you do something that is out of alignment with who you truly are and what you're supposed to be, you have to provide the energy for that. But when you do something that is 100% in alignment with who you are and what you're supposed to be, the universe will provide the energy. And I truly believe that like, when you we're focusing on the wrong thing, we're focusing on what we want, we're focusing on the money, we're focusing on the accolades, the followers, all that stuff, versus being like, what am I truly passionate about? What could I do? What would I do for years and not get paid for it, and I would still love it? If you do something like that, you will eventually get to the point where you're world class at something, whatever it might be. And when you're world class at something, you can usually figure out a way to be extremely successful at that thing, whatever it means to you. And so what I think it really comes down to is when we're looking at what it is that we want to do, we've got to ask ourselves, like, do I really truly feel passionate about this? And if you do, that's what I think you should do. And now you're in alignment. Because one of the things that I've coached a lot of people on, an extreme amount of people, is people get to very successful. Like I have a talk I'm giving in about 3 weeks, and the average like net worth of people in that room is like $20 million. And the talk is around how to turn off, because these guys are so good, and ladies are so good at being on that they don't even enjoy vacations with their families anymore. Yeah. They don't know how to. And what it comes down to is a lot of times with people like that is they went after this success because they thought it was going to fill a void within their soul. And then they got to a point where they feel no fulfillment with a ton of money in their bank account. And it's like Tony Robbins says, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And so they're at the point where they're like, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing? I have all of this money. I have all this quote unquote success that I've been praised for in my life, but my marriage is a wreck, or my children don't respect me, or they don't even, they don't ever see me at their baseball games and stuff. And so I think what's really important for people to understand is like, what you should do is find something that you're passionate about, something that you would want to put work into, and have that feel more like something that fills your soul versus I want to get money and I want to get success because I think that's going to fill my soul. Because that's just, you're a hungry ghost at that point in time. It will never fill you up.
100%. I mean, because this is so critical, you guys. I hope you're listening at home, because what Rob is saying is basically when you do that, what you're saying is like that in the achievement of such thing, making a certain amount of money, finding your partner and getting married or whatever. It's not the thing that you want so much as the feeling you think that thing is going to give you. And it's a rude awakening to achieve or get the thing only to realize it may bring it for a moment, a split second, a couple days, and then it's on to the next thing. And you're on the forever hamster wheel. And that's why on the Coachable podcast, and where we are all about the game of life and like being coachable and willing to learn how to do things better, the way we define success is not necessarily the goal line. The goal line now has become not an achievement of something. It is having a life that feels as good as it looks. Because what is the point of having a life that looks really good if I'm disconnected from my family, my kids won't speak to me, my health is failing, I still feel alone in a crowded room of people, So there's this lack of congruence when we have something, but what we're really looking for is like within. It is like an internal game. And the thing that I want to ask you about more is, we're talking about mindset. We're talking, and when we're working in the mind, it's very logical. You said something that is not so logical, which is about following your intuition. How do you know the difference between your intuition and what that voice is? How do you know the difference between the voice of your intuition and bullshit?
Yeah, good question. For me, I think the thing is, it's a lot of people ask this because we're so cerebral in our society where it's thinking all the time, that we're like never really taught how to do this. Right. And so for me, like, one of the things I know that you're really big into, I'm really big into, is breath work. Like I do breath work. I did it 3 times a day already, right? Like I'm really big. The first thing I do after going to the bathroom, after getting water, is I wake up and I do breath work. And then that starts my meditation. What I have found is that there's like, there is a feeling within me of no fear when I can get to the place of intuition. And then what usually happens is it's like, the intuition and the gut feeling and the heart will come in first, and then my brain comes in, and it sounds like the same voice. Then my brain comes in, and it's like, well, no, you can't do that because of this, and this. And I'm like, but hold on. Like I'm always kind of talking. I'm having a conversation in my head all of the time, right? But I'm like, okay, hold on. Let me test the validity of this thought. Like that's cognitive behavioral therapy. If I do X, Y, Z, which feels like I'm being pulled towards it, will it really be as bad as my brain just made it out to be? Or could that be just fear coming in? And what you really realize is that your brain is an incredible protection mechanism, and it wants to keep you safe. And that is an amazing thing. But when you're trying to step outside the box, when you're trying to be different, it's not really an amazing thing. And so it's hard to put into words exactly what intuition is. But for me, it's like there's a deep knowing of, yeah, this feels right. And I think, we've talked about like God and the universe a lot on this episode, but it's like, I think that that's actually the way that we communicate and we hear what God or the universe or whatever, life or whatever it is you want to call it, is trying to talk to us. But the problem is we're so busy all day long doing things that we don't take a step back and be like, hey, let's have a conversation real quick. And so for me, it's become very important as somebody who I was very lazy up until I decided to start, I found what I want to do and started working. I was very lazy for a long time. And then I got off the path of just workaholic, hardcore workaholic, right? And now it's like, I have these spurts of like, I'm going to work really hard for a couple hours, but then I'm going to check in with myself. I'm going to work really hard for a couple hours, and I'm going to check in with myself. And I'm going to be like, what feels right? And I remember I was listening to Esther Perel like years ago, and someone stood up and they're like, I don't know what I want. How do I figure out what I want? And she says, what if you just woke up every single morning, you close your eyes, and you said, I want to know what I want. And I was like, damn, that's so simple. Like and it's, as you're listening to it, you're like, it can't be that simple. It really is that simple, where it's like, I want to know what I want. And some people out there are like, I don't know what my passion is. I don't know what I want. I don't know what these are. So it's like, I want to know what I want. I want to know what I want. I want to know what my passion is. I want to know what feels right. I want to know what feels like the right path for me to go down. And then what I think is important is to start doing different things. So it's like, sometimes we do the exact same shit we've been doing every single day for years. And we're like, well, why don't I know my passions? Well, because you haven't found it yet. You're not searching for it, right? It's like my mom recently just got married. She's 70. Oh God, I don't know. She's like 72, 74, something like that. Let me do the math. She's 72 right now. She's going to be 73. And she just got married. She was single for 20 something years. Right. And she was like, for years, she was like, I want to find a man. I want to find a man. I want to find a man. And I was like, leave your house, lady. He's not going to come knocking on your door. Like, you've got to put yourself in places. And then she found him at like a friend's party, right? A get together. And so it's like, you've got to put yourself out there. Well, it's the same thing where it's like, if I want to know what I want to figure out what my intuition is. What if I sat down and I said, I want to know what my intuition feels like. And I listen to the feeling that's inside of me and see what's there. And then it doesn't have to be like, hey, I need to quit my job today. Like, it could be, but it could be like, for some reason, I feel pulled to go to this restaurant today. I'm gonna go to that restaurant because it feels, for some reason that popped up into my head. I'm gonna go to it. I'm just gonna trust. And then you go there and you see someone you haven't seen in years and you're like, oh shit. Oh, things are starting to connect. And I think that's what people really need to focus on is like, we're always in our heads so much. I think that it just naturally starts to click in. The more that you get yourself into your body, the more that you do breath work, the more that you meditating. Like, I've been telling people, be bored more often.
Same.
Stop calling it boredom.
100%.
And because it's like, oh, boredom is just like what? The absence of something to do. Instead of calling it boredom, just call it self-care. Just call it relaxing and see if your mindset changes around it. And as you spend more time in silence and not on your phone and not reading and not journaling, all of those things are great. I love all of those. But just being silent, there's something that kind of comes in, and there's this voice that starts coming in, these feelings start coming in, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. This is what they were talking about.
Oh, I'm so glad you went there. I'm so glad you said that, because again, you guys, like, you're hearing this from Rob Dial, the mindset mentor, and he's saying, in some ways, you need to get out of your mind. You need to, and you need to drop in. And that's the saying. It's like the longest journey people will ever take is 6 inches or whatever, how many inches it is between the head and the heart. And a practice of mine that has actually enabled me to do this so much more powerfully and quickly has actually been incorporating a rapé practice in my meditation, if you know what that is. And if, for those that don't know, it's a non-psychoactive indigenous plant medicine that is really helpful for grounding and clearing the mind. And
it definitely grounds you. That's for sure.
Oh my gosh. For me, it's like a life, it's become a life hack, because it's in that moment where I'm just so still and connected to myself. I can actually, all of those monkey mind thoughts are cleared away, and I can actually receive, like, what does my heart feel, or what is actually true for me in this moment. And, you know, when you're talking about your intuition, I love that for me, it is also like what you described. It's like this knowing. And sometimes that internal knowing, we so often default to, I don't know. When you're like, what do you want? Or what do you think you should do? Or what do you think the answer is? And we say, I don't know, because technically it's a lazy answer, because you haven't had to actually think. So I'll ask the question, my coach taught me this early on. It's like, if you did know, what do you think it would be? Right? Actually inquire within yourself, actually take the time to think for yourself. But then a lot of times we know the answer and we're avoiding it because it's going to require us to change. Sometimes the intuition is, for me, it's inconvenient. It's not logical. It's like, oh yeah, it's that voice that's like, maybe you shouldn't be drinking as much as you are. Maybe alcohol actually isn't serving you to help you get to your goals. And that's not convenient. And that's not, necessarily the voice.
Not when you live in Vegas, right?
Right. And yet it's this knowing that this thing might be standing in the way. And I think what I respect most, and this is a quality of the people that come on the show, is they're willing to turn towards the thing that they're afraid of, or that they don't want to admit is really true, or don't want to admit is really there, versus shying away from it and numbing and running in the other direction. That's like, I'm willing to look at this and sit with this, because ultimately what Rob is saying, and what I would like to just like reiterate, is like, sometimes you already know.
Oh, you always know.
You are the one, like, we're so conditioned to look outside of ourselves for the answers and ask you and go listen to the podcast or get the new book, which you still should, because there's so many great tools. But what you do in this book, Rob, is you point people back to themselves, that they actually have the answer that they're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. I fully agree with you is look, like, I wrote a book. It's great. I have a podcast. All of that stuff is good, but nothing at all that I could ever say could ever be better than your own intuition. It's not. If you don't read my book because you want to meditate, I think that that's the best thing you could possibly do, right? If you want to journal and be with yourself instead of like listening to our podcast, we would love for you to listen to our podcast. Hopefully they can help you, but ultimately, I don't know what's best for you. I think that there's a lot of people that are like, quote unquote, gurus out there. They're like, I'm going to tell you the exact way, follow me and all this stuff. And it's like, I'm just the idiot in the corner trying to hopefully say something that like sparks your own intuition that goes, oh man, yeah, maybe I should get off the couch and start working out more, or stop drinking, or maybe I should start that meditation practice, or whatever it is that it might be. And one of the things that you said that I think is really important, I've been saying a lot recently, I was talking about the guys who are successful and all that stuff, is that we always think, and you said we're always looking external. The thing that I have found through, and it took me probably 17 years of working myself till I finally found this, is everything that I want from the external world, whatever it is, the validation, the praise, whatever it is actually what I want for myself. That's it. Like, whatever you think you want from somebody else, you actually just want from yourself. Whatever you want from society, you want from yourself. Whatever you want. So if you want to be accepted and feel more accepted, you actually just want to accept yourself. And there's a lot of people that feel like they lack confidence or they don't have the self-love that they want to. And really what it is because you're not working on your own self-acceptance, your own self-love. I did a episode a couple weeks ago that was around that, where it's like, you want to get better at self-love. What you just need to do is learn to just accept yourself and realize that the natural state of yourself after you finally accept yourself is just love. And you're not looking like I used to listen to a meditation all the time by a guy named Muji. And he used to say, you have no pockets, you have no storehouse. And what he means by that is like, no matter what you do, no matter what you accomplish and the cars and the money and the success and places that you travel, nothing will ever add or subtract to who you are. You can't become more of who you are. You can't become less of who you are. So you might as well just figure out a way to love and accept who you truly are. And when you like really get that deep in your bones of like what you're looking for from the external is really what you're looking for from yourself, you're like, yeah, maybe I should spend some more time with myself.
Yeah. It's the one relationship you will never get out of. And I think, that is a beautiful way to close. It's like, it's not about doing more. It's about like being yourself. Like being yourself is the superpower because you are one of one. And there's no one else like you in your unique way and the way you uniquely express. And the real game, the real level up is who can learn to be themselves the quickest. Yeah.
I'm still trying on that one. I'm trying my best. It's taken a long time.
We're all on that same journey, and I think if we can hopefully through this conversation, which I believe does point people back to that, which is like, whatever answer you're seeking, whatever you're looking for isn't out there. All of this is in here. And if you take the time to get present and to become aware and to become and allow for whatever's true to be in your experience, and how can I learn to be with this truth in this moment and show up to that, then like you've stepped into a whole new game. Like we've been playing the game with a lot of the wrong rules and we're wondering why it's no fun. And I think you're giving people, a whole new rule book for how they can start to level up, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. Please tell people, obviously, Mindset Mentor podcast, we know, is one of our favorites. We'll put the link in the show notes for people to go connect with you there and listen to the show. But please tell people where they can go grab the book and how they can connect with you online. And if there's anything else exciting happening in your world that you want to share, please do so.
Yeah. I mean, thanks. They can buy the book wherever books are sold. I think we're in like 14 countries at this point right now. So there's people that are worldwide. And then, wherever you like to get your content, a pretty good chance that I'm there. So put Rob Dial somewhere on the internet and I'll probably pop up. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, MySpace.
All the things.
No, I don't. We don't have MySpace. Is the only place that I'm not, I think, at this point. So yeah, that, and then the podcast, The Mindset Mentor, comes out 4 times a week. So that's how I got to 1,400 episodes so fast. Is started at 3 times a week. Now we're at 4 times a week. So it's Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Amazing. You got a pocket coach right there. You guys go listen to The Mindset Mentor to stay motivated, inspired, and empowered to take control and action in your life so that you can be the version of you that you can be. If you look up to Rob and you are inspired by him and his story and what he's accomplished, whatever you see in him exists in you. And you might not have fully stepped into that yet, but you can only see it in someone else if you have it within yourself. So tap into that this week. Go apply something you learned on this episode. That is the best way to say thank you to Rob and to myself, is actually to use what you learn here. Knowledge isn't power. Applied knowledge is power. So continue to stay coachable. I love you. We'll see you next week on the Coachable Podcast.